Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the birthplace of America, and also home to the most ruthless, most savage sports fans in the country. And to this day, no incident did more to advance that reputation than one unconscionable showing at Franklin Field more than a half-century ago, a holiday season horror show that solidified Philadelphia as the most vicious sports city in America. With all due respect to the notoriously churlish fans in Boston and New York, the savagery of Philadelphia sports fans is the stuff of legend, a reputation built through decades of questionable behavior. Towards opposing players, towards opposing fans, towards broadcasters, hell, even towards their own players and each other. Remember that time Eagles fans twice assaulted a Washington superfan at Veterans Stadium in 1983, sending him to the hospital with a broken leg? Or that time that Eagles fans cheered while Dallas Cowboys star Michael Irvin lay motionless on the field after suffering a spinal injury during a 1999 game? Then there was also that time that a Flyers fan tried to mix it up with Toronto Maple Leafs enforcer Ty Domi, going after him so hard during a 2001 game that he ended up falling into the penalty box. And then there was that time when a Phillies fan intentionally vomited on an 11-year-old girl during a game at Citizens Bank Park for, well, does it really matter?
That's disgusting!
Ultimately, Philly fans have long delighted in being ungovernable. At one point, the Eagles even had a jail inside their stadium to contain their most unruly fans. And the hostility of Philadelphia's fans knows no bounds. As MLB legend Pete Rose once put it, some of these people would boo the crack in the Liberty Bell. In fact, a 2011 GQ ranking pegged Eagles fans as the second most insufferable fan base in America. The only group that was worse? Phillies fans. However, 5.5 decades ago, this reputation wasn't nearly as inextricable as it is now. Back in the late 1960s, in fact, things were actually going reasonably well for sports fans in Philadelphia. They didn't have much reason to act out. In 1967, the 76ers brought Philadelphia its first NBA championship, with Wilt Chamberlain and co. dethroning the great Boston Celtics and then vanquishing the San Francisco Warriors in the finals. That same year, Philadelphia not only landed an NHL franchise, but watched the newly formed Flyers make the playoffs in their inaugural season. However, as swimmingly as things were going for the Sixers and Flyers, by the late 1960s, the Eagles were struggling, big time. And in 1968, after 5 losing seasons in a 6-year span, the Eagles' profound misery unearthed a previously unseen level of hostility from sports fans in Philadelphia, or anywhere else for that matter. And that mounting frustration eventually culminated in a moment of viciousness that cemented the unflattering reputation Philly sports fans have today. The Eagles lost 11 straight games to kick off the '68 campaign, laying claim to one of the most pathetic stretches in NFL history. In fact, they became the first team to lose 11 straight games in a season since the Philadelphia Eagles, who had previously done so in 1936. And the '68 Eagles didn't just lose, they got slaughtered. Over the course of their 0-11 start, the Eagles lost by an average of 15 points. During that span, they scored more than 17 points in a game only once, racked up the second most turnovers in the NFL, and were generally unwatchable. The only consolation for Eagles fans was that a league-worst record would get them the first pick in the next year's draft and a potential savior in O.J. Simpson, USC's superstar running back. Except the Eagles managed to screw that up too. Following their 0-11 start, the Eagles won each of their next 2 games, effectively costing them the first overall pick, which ended up going to the Buffalo Bills. So when the final game of that godforsaken '68 campaign arrived, Eagles fans and the city of Philadelphia simmered with anger. They had just endured one of the most horrendous seasons in football history, and they weren't even going to have the #1 pick to show for it. To its credit, the team tried to imbue a little bit of magic into that meaningless mid-December game via a halftime Christmas pageant, but the universe had other plans. And instead of magic, madness ensued.
Santa's coming to town!
Santa! Oh my God!
Santa here?
The night before the Eagles hosted the Minnesota Vikings at Franklin Field, a massive snowstorm blanketed the city and the stadium. The snowy, sub-zero conditions not only made things miserable for Eagles fans from the get-go, but it also prevented the Santa Claus the team had contracted from making it to the stadium. He was coming in from New Jersey, by the way. In their desperation, knowing that they could not deny their fans an appearance from Santa Claus after a season like this, the Eagles had their entertainment director scour the crowd for a suitable replacement. And believe it or not, he found one. Frank Olivo, a 20-year-old South Philly native whose family had been Eagles season ticket holders since the 1950s and who himself had a tradition of showing up dressed as Santa Claus to Philly's final game of each season. Naturally, he was the guy. But as you might expect, things did not go smoothly. For starters, in lieu of a traditional Santa sack, Olivo was handed an equipment bag filled with towels. Didn't exactly project the same magical quality. And on top of that, the float that was supposed to carry Santa across the field got stuck in the mud, meaning that Olivo was going to have to parade out in front of one of the most pissed off stadiums ever on foot. The plan was this. As soon as he heard the brass band fire up "Here Comes Santa Claus," Olivo was to walk from one end zone to another through 2 columns of Eagles cheerleaders, then head back to the underbelly of the stadium via the track on the sidelines. Sounds simple in theory, but Philly had other ideas. With the score tied at 7-7 and nobody in the crowd enjoying themselves, the two teams adjourned for halftime. Before long, "Here Comes Santa Claus" blared out over the stadium. Olivo's moment had come. And when he hit the field, Philadelphia transformed from the city of brotherly love into something downright monstrous. As soon as the Eagles' makeshift Santa began his march, the crowd unleashed a tidal wave of boos upon him. Olivo, understandably, was initially frightened by the reception, but he soldiered on. And while there was no shortage of reasons for Eagles fans to be in a foul mood, some theorized that the harsh reception Olivo received was on account of his subpar costume. As the Eagles' then PR director said, "He was the worst looking Santa I'd ever seen. Bad suit, scraggly beard." Olivo, for the record, took great pride in his suit, which he paid $100 for and wore for almost 40 Christmases, although he did concede that his beard wasn't up to snuff. Regardless though, he was still Santa Claus, and they were booing him. Eagles fans were booing Santa Claus. And that was just the beginning. After making it through the harrowing 100-yard march, Olivo ended up in the south end zone, i.e. within firing range. And sure enough, as he stood there waving to the crowd, Santa got hit with a snowball, a missile from the upper deck. Then he got hit with another, and then another, and then another. Before long, Santa Claus was getting pelted with snowballs from every which way. Olivo estimated that he got hit with several dozen snowballs, though he managed to take the barrage with good humor. In the midst of the bombardment, Olivo started waving his finger at the crowd and telling them,
"You're not getting anything for Christmas."
And in that moment, Philadelphia's ruthless reputation crystallized. Lots of fan bases have had regrettable moments of poor behavior, but booing Santa? Throwing snowballs at Santa? This was unprecedented. It was unimaginable, no matter how frustrated they were with the team, the abysmal season, and the brutal weather. And after their unfathomable treatment of jolly old St. Nick was included in Howard Cosell's nationally televised weekend report on ABC, there was nothing that Philadelphia could do but own their dubious status as the most vicious city in sports. Which, to be sure, they have. For his part, Olivo relished his 15 minutes of fame and his singular place in the annals of Philly sports history, although he had zero interest in an encore performance. When asked if he'd reprise his role as Santa for the Eagles' Christmas pageant in '69, Olivo said no way. If it doesn't snow, he quipped, they'll probably throw beer bottles. And nearly 6 decades later, nobody would put such a thing, throwing beer bottles at Santa, past a Philly crowd. It's not the same thing, obviously, but Phillies fans did famously throw batteries at J.D. Drew back in 1999. And ultimately, the reputation they solidified on that frigid December day in 1968 very much endures. And it remains a fact of life that if you're a visiting player, a visiting fan, or even literal Santa Claus, you're probably gonna take a healthy dose of shit in Philadelphia. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.